Welcome to the Mama Truth Show, where soulful mamas embrace the whole truth of the messiness and magic of motherhood. Check us out at mamatruthshow.com. Here's your host, Amy Ehlers, the Wake Up Call Coach.
Happy Mama Truth Monday, mamas. It's Amy Ehlers here, the Wake Up Call Coach, and we're going to get into it today. Are you ready to get into it today? Let me tell you, we have a guest who is phenomenal. It's Andrea Owen, and she's an author, she's a mentor, she's a certified life coach, she's a mom, she's a roller derby rebel, she's a hellraiser. And she's really passionate about women learning how to really, truly value themselves. She has an incredible podcast, and her website is yourkickasslife.com, which I love. Her first book is called 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life, BS-Free Wisdom to Ignite Your Inner Badass and Live the Life You Deserve. And she has a new book that's coming out in about a year, so we'll have her back on the Mama Truth Show to talk about that. But it's called How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. So you can really see why I'm so excited, because she's a truth teller, y'all. So you are going to love her. So welcome, Andrea, so much. Thank you so much for being on the Mama Truth Show.
I was so happy to be here. I am so ecstatic to have this conversation.
Yay. Well, today we're going to talk about resentment. We're going to talk about blame. We're going to talk about having a special needs child. And we're going to talk about just being a mom and being able to, really have our lives go okay no matter what heartbreak we've been through. Mm-hmm. I would just love, Andrea, for you to just start by just telling the listeners a little bit about your life story. Like, what's your story, love?
The short version. I grew up in Southern California, and this is what I was telling you. I think, speaking of heartbreak, I was in a relationship for almost 14 years, and I was married before, and we had been married for a couple of years, and talking about having our first child, as usually a lot of couples do during that time. And I had it all planned out. I had my bullet point list of like when we were going to conceive and all of these things. And my then husband, had an affair with our neighbor that lived across the street and got her pregnant. And wow. They had been seeing each other. When I found out, they had actually been dating for about 7 months. It wasn't like it was a one-time thing. They were in a relationship, and a divorce ensued, and it was extremely painful. His family was my family. My own parents got divorced when I was 18, and his family had taken me in when I was very young, and I was extremely close to them. It was a big family, had lots of siblings and, in-laws and things like that. So it not only was I having to grieve the relationship ending with him, I was 30 at the time, but the loss of my family, I wasn't given a choice. And so then I started dating someone immediately thereafter, probably the worst choice, but the choice I picked. And that person I thought was amazing. And turned out he had cancer, but then it turned out he had lied about having cancer for the 9 months that we were dating. And he was actually addicted to opiates and had conned me out of a lot of money, out of a lot of things. And that was really my moment where I decided that I had to kind of take responsibility for my life and the choices that I had made and what I had tolerated, what I had attracted in my life. Not to say that like those two men weren't jerks, what they did, their choices were not good, but I had never listened to my intuition when my intuition told me in both of those relationships to walk away, didn't listen. And it really was the first time I kind of picked myself up and said, okay, and actually listened to my therapist, who said, you should probably try this. You should read these books. And that's really when everything started to change. And so that was about 10 years ago. So it's been a long process of kicking addictions and really just telling the truth about my own feelings. I mean, I didn't grow up in a house where it was, I didn't grow up in an environment where it was okay to be vulnerable and like feel your feelings and things like rage and grief and like all these like hard, darker emotions my family just didn't have words to put around them. So they didn't exist. And, I got into my early 30s and was like, what do I do with all of this? And I was channeling it in all these really harmful behaviors. And so it was then about 10 years ago when I had to look at that, and it was not easy. I would rather I blamed everybody else. I offloaded all of my hurt. I stockpiled it. I said yes to things I didn't want to do and was angry about it. So I did all of these things that were, that didn't feel true to me until I started to chip away at it a little bit. And it's still today in 2016, a one day at a time process for me.
Mm. Wow, honey.
I mean, that was a lot.
It was. And I just so appreciate
Nice
your vulnerability. I know, right? Here you are, people. Yeah, well, I so appreciate your vulnerability about it, because I know that there are moms that are listening right now who are in the midst of heartbreak, who are in the midst of, something devastating happening, a tragedy happening, or just feeling rage and resentment, whether it's from, their partner, whoever they're co-parenting with, whether a wife or a husband or whatever, or around their kids. And they have these big feelings. And I feel like until we understand and learn how to deal with and process big feelings, we keep feeling like shit as your book. So I'm curious about that for you. Like, when you look at your pattern of now being such a success, quote unquote, but meaning having so much happiness in your life, being so kick-ass, being able to tell the truth, what do you really see as the first step for those people that are feeling big feelings, but they don't know what to do with any of them?
I think it's like, it's interesting. I know you're a good friend of Sark, and I had her on my podcast, and we were having a conversation about like giving yourself permission to feel a bunch of different feelings all at the same time, even if they don't make any sense to you. And I think that that's a really great place to start, is just to start naming them out loud. And sometimes I do that even, as someone who still kind of feels like an infant in feeling my own feelings. I was someone who drank it away. For a long time, I took it out on the treadmill, or I took it out on any relationship that I happened to be in at the time. And now it's about just kind of, sometimes I even just say the feeling out loud. It's like, I'm feeling really furious right now. And if it's just to me, I'm not saying it to any particular person, but I think that it's also what I have realized. And this is, in the work of Brene Brown says this too, is that in order to feel the light, we have to be able to feel the dark too. And I'm still astounded how much more joy I feel now that I allow myself and give myself permission to feel resentment sometimes, or to feel grief and all of these things that I ran away from for so very long. And they're not easy feelings to walk through, but I think that, like, for me, I was always so afraid that if I walked through there, or if I opened up Pandora's box, that I would never walk out of it. Like, I can't, if I open that up, I may never stop crying.
Yep.
If I walk through that hell, I can't guarantee that I'm going to walk out on the other side. That was terrifying for me. And that's self-trust, and it's, I didn't have any of it. So for me to finally get to a place where I was like, I can't hold this in anymore, or I am going to fall down and probably never get up. So for me, it was just like baby steps. I think it was a lot of journaling. Yeah. It was a lot of conversations with my therapist, and comfortable conversations with people that I trust in my life. And slowly but surely, I was okay feeling those feelings.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you said of just being able to tell the truth about how we're feeling. Because I think we've all had those experiences, whether in our lives, growing up, or even currently, where you see someone and you say, "How are you?" And they go, "Fine," with like that, like, you can,
great, everything's
so
great,
not fucking fine. Excuse me, potty mouth over here. But it's like, you are not fine. Like, you are the furthest.
Oh, I see that a mile away. I see that a mile away. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And it's like, and I get, like, it can be really inconvenient.
Oh yeah.
For in that moment, whether, someone just had a morning that was really hard, or they're in some, like, a major trauma right now, or whatever it is, it's like to be able to tell the truth. And so I'm curious for you, knowing that you're a truth teller, knowing that you feel all of the big feelings, which includes feeling joy and ecstasy and bliss beyond our wildest dreams, right? But it's like, then how do we as moms keep it together? Like, what is that line for you around keeping it together for our kids so that we can function, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still kind of learning what that is too, like that one day at a time thing. And I think that, like I was saying, like I didn't grow up in a house where, I mean, and I remember my uncle died suddenly when I was probably like 8 or 9. And I came home from school and my dad was home, which was unusual for him to be home that early. And my parents' bedroom was dark. And my dad said, your Uncle Gus died. And just leave mom alone. She's in there. And I mean, she didn't come out of her room for like 2 or 3 days, and it was dark. And I remember one time seeing her walk down the hall in the middle of the day, and she was in her robe and her slippers. And I think, in having a very short conversation with her about it years later, the doctor had given her Valium, which my mom was never a drinker. So she was just kind of like making it through the days, and no one talked to me about it. Like no one pulled me aside. And I mean, even after it happened, like my mom still was never told me. I mean, like even if his name would come up, she would just kind of say, like very matter of factly, like how devastated her and her sisters were and how sudden it was. And then it's like off to the next subject. So it's like, there was not a place for that. So I think like now as a mom, it's being kind of like new and feeling my own feelings. It's like, I asked a colleague of mine who specializes in grief, and her name's Dr. Martha Adkins. And I asked her because I'm like, you're the expert. So I loved her definition. She's like, if you're in one of those like primal states of grief, like on the floor in the fetal position, probably not okay to do that in front of your children, unless it's like a crisis situation where you can't help it. But she's like, crying in front of them is perfectly normal, and to also have a conversation with them about it.
Right.
So that's what I do with my kids. I remember there was one time where we were going through a really hard time, and I had a conversation with my sister, and it like didn't go well. And I was sitting on the steps in our house, and my husband had walked in the door, and I burst into tears, and I knew my kids were nearby, and I was just like, whatever, it is what it is. And Jason was like, what happened? And so I'm telling him what happened, and being aware of not to like, throw my sister under the bus in front of my children. And
right. Totally.
And I was crying, but it was so interesting. Like they almost intuitively came by and sat next to me, each of them, and just sat there. And then I talked to them separately afterwards and asked them, like, did it scare you when mommy was crying? And they both had different answers, but it ended up being okay. And I was happy that they could see that their mother, it was vulnerable and cries sometimes, and that she's okay. And that it also kind of gives them permission to be able to feel whatever they're feeling and talk to us about it. Like that's the kind of environment I want to raise my children in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. While you were talking, I had this flashback to when I was a kid, and my mom, went through a really hard depression, and she ended up with an ulcer. And like, she kept telling the doctor, something's not right. Nobody believed her until she started throwing up blood.
Wow.
And I remember I was in this dance class, and part of this dance class was you had to make these really elaborate costumes. And I remember very vividly being in her bedroom when she told me, I can't make this costume. There's just no way I can make this costume. And her falling apart about it, just crying, because I'm sure what I imagine now is that she felt like a failure as a mom, and she, like all of those things. And then her best friend like showed up and made my costume for me. And I remember like her friend showing up and doing that. And then that's when my whole family, we went to therapy, a few therapy sessions together as a family. And it was like, I was crying a lot in therapy. I've always been a very big feeler. Imagine that. But it was like the therapist, like really acknowledging how awesome it was that I was feeling all these feelings and that I was expressing them.
Wow, what a gift.
Thank God, right? Because it was like, I felt like she's like, you are feeling all the feelings for your entire family right now. And it was like, from a very young age, it was like, okay, this intuition that I have, this sensitivity that I have is actually being celebrated by this therapist, instead of I'm made to feel bad or wrong.
Right.
And it was such a powerful moment. And I think seeing my mom be vulnerable like that also evoked so much compassion and empathy for me at a young age. I mean, I'm sure I was like 8 or 9 years old. And it was like, it's such a big moment in our family. And so I say all of that just to just as a reminder for myself as a mom too, as I feel big feelings, allowing my kids in at an appropriate, your therapist was saying, or the doctor was saying, of like, yeah, maybe like falling down on your hands and knees and scratching at the walls, maybe keep that away from the children. But it's like having those moments where we get to actually have feelings. Like this is part of it for our children, and for them to witness it, and to witness that then mommy gets through the other side and fixes dinner or breakfast, or calls and orders the pizza or whatever it is. It's like, what a beautiful lesson for our children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I apologize to my children probably on a weekly basis. I lose my patience, and I definitely have to go in and say that I'm sorry. And we even had the conversation, cause my kids for a while were responding with, it's okay. And I was like, no, sometimes it's not. Like an appropriate response sometimes, if someone apologizes to you, is to say thank you. Because if you say it's okay, you're excusing the behavior. No, I could go on and on about that, but I think it's just like, I think that I noticed that my children are much smarter than I sometimes give them credit for.
Right.
So yeah, it's just really navigating kind of one day at a time.
Well, and I know for you, so you have a special needs. One of your children is special needs.
My son.
Yeah, your son is special needs. And talk to us a little bit about that, because I know, talk about big feelings and talk about blame, resentment, like any of those feelings that come up for any of us as moms. And then I know there's a lot of moms listening that also have special needs children, and that it's a specific kind of parenting and mothering that has to occur with that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things that come up around it. So my son he was diagnosed when he was, I think it was almost 6, with Asperger's, sensory processing disorder, and anxiety disorder. And for him, he is high functioning. He's in a mainstream class, but my daughter is neurotypical, so she doesn't have any. I see a little bit of anxiety in her sometimes, but I guess the apple didn't fall far from the tree with either of my children. But I think that when my son was getting into like school age and after his diagnosis, and we just had a lot of problems with school and finding him the right services and interventions, and I know we're very blessed to even be able to have those for him. But I went through a period. First, I went through a period of grief. I think that for a lot of special needs parents, this was my experience, is that we get the diagnosis and then we're sort of thrust into this world of helping them, of resources and solutions and interventions and classes and insurance. And it's like this to-do list. And for me, I was under this immense blanket of grief, of just like, this is not what I anticipated. Like, I have this child, with this disability, and yes, I'm grateful that we live in 2016 where we know so much about it. And yes, I know that and I kept getting these responses from people like, well, he's still the same kid, everything from that to, the worst ones were, at least he's verbal. I got that a couple times, and I wanted to punch everybody in the face, or there was a lot of people that were coming at me with like diet changes and like all these solutions. And, I just wanted somebody to come up to me and just grab me by the shoulders and say, I know what you're going through is fucking hard.
Yeah.
This is hard. And, it was tough. It was like, I had to grieve because he was my firstborn too. Yeah. So it's like, we have this like idea of how things are going to be. And I had to grieve the loss of that. Like, is he amazing as he is? Absolutely. Of course he is. But I think that there's something to be said for just giving yourself permission to grieve what you thought, it's like parenting a child you didn't expect, and,
right.
And, so, it's like, I went through that too, but, there were moments of where his behavior was so difficult. And as someone who struggles with control myself, and it's one of the behaviors that I've had probably the hardest time letting go of, and just surrendering and in my own practice. But, parenting, I think, is difficult as it is. Having, I have a neurotypical child. Parenting a special needs child takes so much patience. And there were moments where I finally sat down one day and was just I was done. I was done with parenting, and I was done with parenting him. And I pounded out journaling where it was basically like a poem about resentment and how much I resented both of them, and how this isn't what I signed up for. And if I could do it all over again, I don't know if I would choose this path. And I was also feeling really resentful. A lot of my colleagues are child-free by choice.
Mm.
And I, like hearing about their life and how carefree it is. And I'm like, sounds kind of nice. And I even talked to my mom about it. And we were having this conversation about how my generation, a lot of women my age are choosing not to have children. And my mom said to me, she goes, I could see how that would be appealing. And I wasn't mad, being her daughter. I'm like, okay. Like, and she said, she's like, if that would have been around, like more of like, accepted when I was your age, I might have chosen to not have children. And I was like, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad at her for saying that to me, who's her daughter. But yeah.
What I love about this so much is just the level of permission that you gave yourself and by stating this and talking about this in such a real way that you're giving moms to feel, whether they're moms with special needs children where it's been taken over their life. I have several friends who have children with autism, one that's very severe autism, one that's like where the child's able to be in mainstream and high functioning and what have you. But it's like, yeah, it took over their lives for a good few years of trying every treatment under the sun, injections, this diet, that diet, this specialist, that specialist, money, time, energy, full-time job. And to be able to have the space to be like, I am pissed off about this. I did not sign up for this. I am resentful as all get out. And to know that that does not equate that you don't love your child. That doesn't
have anything to do with it.
It's loyal to your child. I feel like so often any of the behaviors that our children have, that us admitting it and admitting the resentment or admitting how hard it is does not mean they don't go together, that it means you don't love your kid,
That's where the problem arises, is that we make it mean something.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big struggle for me too. I mean, even like years out of my first marriage, as I was still grieving it and I still had these dreams about my former family, I'm like, does that mean that I'm in love with him? And it's like, no, it doesn't. It means that I went through this traumatic event. And, the issues are in our tissues and the body always knows. And it's like still processing. Like, I think that we don't give grief enough credit. And that's why they call it a grief cycle, is because it keeps coming back.
Right.
And it's like, I still feel grief for something's happened in my childhood. And I still feel grief for things that even happened to my parents, like secondhand grief for them. It's just, I think the more that I have given myself permission to feel whatever it is, the less power it has. It's like, it kind of like flows through and it's like, thank you. That's all I needed. Bye.
Yeah. Yeah.
But instead we're like holding on to it and shoving it down. And like, that's why they call it baggage. We pack it in and carry it around. And then it comes out in other ways. And that's why I drank. That's why I starved myself. That's why I blamed. It was just all these behaviors that made me feel so incredibly crappy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then it's like just the ways that we can self-medicate. It's like, it's astounding to me as someone that occasionally self-medicates for sure. It's like, whether it's a couple glasses of wine or the ice cream or the chips or whatever you're
exactly checking email.
Exactly. Being, on social media, like, becoming addicted to Facebook or whatever it is. It's like, we all have our ways of taking that edge off. We all have our ways of numbing out on some level because it feels like it's too much. So, I'm curious, do you have any sort of process that you give your clients or that you've written about in your books? I know that you have so many different tools that you have. What's like one of like the golden tools that you might be able to give the Mama Truth Show listeners?
For what specifically? Because I do have like a whole box of them.
Well, I feel like specifically around in those moments, like you're in a moment, you're having a big feeling, maybe you just got the kids to bed and you're feeling that urge to numb out. And
okay. Got it. So I think like one of my favorites, it was funny, I was just got off the phone earlier with a client where I was giving her this exercise is to ask yourself the question, what do I think that this drink or whatever is going to solve? Like, what problem am I actually trying to solve by drinking? And usually the first answer that people give me is, well, I'm overwhelmed, or I just want to take the edge off. It's been a long day with these kids. I just want to, so then just keep asking yourself the question, like, why? What is it about that makes you want to drink? Like, again, like, what do you think that the drinking is going to solve? And I think that like what it does is just kind of like digs underneath to see what's under there, because at the root of it usually is there's something there. And it could be resentments. Maybe you resent your partner for not helping you enough and you just haven't had the conversation because you've put too high expectations on yourself about what it means to be a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
Maybe you're feeling like you've put on these ideal standards of what it means to be a wife, and you need to set some boundaries with your husband. Maybe you are just totally have just burnt yourself out in your friendships because some emotional boundaries need to be set. Like there's all kinds of things that usually aren't at the forefront of, like, nobody really wakes up in the morning and is like, I think I need to set some emotional boundaries with my daughter. No, they usually feel like, I can't wait to have 2 glasses of wine tonight with dinner.
Right.
But it's like, it's not solving the problem.
Right.
And I always say, as a culture, we like that saying, like, I need something to take the edge off. I think that a lot of us would be a lot happier if we actually took the time to shine the light on those edges. And trust me, I was somebody who was like, hell no. I'll take my wine and my brownies and, and my library books, and I'll be just fine.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I was slowly unraveling. And I think that that's where a lot of moms end up.
I love that. It's time to shine the light on those edges instead of taking the edge off.
Yeah.
It
never really goes away. It doesn't. I mean, God, we try. I just feel like there would not be an alcohol industry as profitable as it is if alcohol really worked, because then we would only be doing it like once every 2 weeks,
right?
Instead of every single night.
Right.
And, I think that as a culture, we are afraid to feel our feelings. I think that, I am not an exception, that I grew up in that family who did not have a place to put my emotions and feelings. And so it was starting to manifest through numbing. And, that's what I would ask people is like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? What do you think that alcohol is helping you with?
Whether it's alcohol or the ice cream or the chips or getting on the treadmill again for the 4th time that day, or having a cigarette or whatever it is, but just going in there and exploring. I love that. So I'm going to kind of give that to all of you mamas as an assignment. Why not try it tonight if you're someone or the reality television show or the social media or whatever it is. It's like when you feel that edginess, go in and explore it and let us know on the Mama Truth Circle Facebook group what you discovered, what you uncovered. So as we wrap up here, Andrea, I want you to tell everyone the name of your podcast.
So if you go into iTunes or Stitcher and you search for Your Kick-Ass Life,
great,
I'm in there. There's another one, David Wood. I don't even know if he's producing any more episodes, but there is The Kick-Ass Life, but that's not mine. That's different, very different. He's a great guy. I've been on there a few times.
Yeah.
But it's Your Kick-Ass Life, and you'll see my picture on the artwork there.
Perfect. Your Kick-Ass Life. So you're a podcast listener, mama, so make sure to check that out. I've been on Andrea's show. It's awesome.
You can search for your name to listen to that one. It was good. That was a good episode.
That was a fun episode. And then I know you have a free gift for everyone at yourkickasslife.com/free.
It's easy.
Yeah. So tell us about that gift.
Well, you know this all too well, about that inner mean girl, the inner critic. And I'm a big believer, as I think you are too, is that we can't make it completely go away, but we certainly can manage it.
Yep.
And so it's just my 3 tools of how to manage it. And it's a little mini ebook, and it also comes in audio format as well, in case you'd rather listen to it. And yourkickasslife.com/free.
Awesome. So go check that out, mamas, how the shit talking in your head is making you crazy. 3 ways to change it. I love it. Awesome. So as we wrap up, I want to ask you the question I ask all my guests here on the Mama Truth Show, which is, what is messy and what is magical about motherhood for you these days?
What is messy besides my kitchen floors? God bless cleaning ladies. They just came yesterday. What is messy? I think all of it. It's just showing up, I think, is messy, and like being your authentic self as a human, because I think sometimes we try to show up differently, like as a mother. I think that's messy. And what's magical, it's like, it's the small little moments, the ordinary moments, the sound of, my kids' laughter. Like I can never, ever get enough of it. My daughter's giggle and my son, the way he laughs with his whole body. And, I can't stop touching their hair too. It just those, and like saying goodnight, just these like small moments that just absolutely make my heart explode every day. And yeah, I could go on, but it's just the small stuff.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, darling, for
Thank
being on the
you.
Mama Truth Show. I know that you have gifted so many people with permission, and I can't wait to hear everyone's response to the show. So
Yeah.
with that, mamas, I will send you off to have a beautiful Monday. It's Amy Ehlers, the Wake Up Call Coach, signing off, wishing you a magical Mama Truth Monday.
Bye, everybody.
Next time, keep embracing the messiness and magic of motherhood. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, mamas. Did you know that Amy has a new ebook out? It's called Sacred Self-Care for Moms, 7 Steps to Nurturing Yourself so you can be the mom you were born to be. And you can receive your free copy by going to sacredselfcarebook.com. That's sacredselfcarebook.com. And please don't keep the Mama Truth Show a secret. The biggest compliment you can give is to share the Mama Truth Show with your loved ones and write a review on iTunes. Until next time, keep embracing the messiness and the magic of motherhood.